Hey everybody, so not too long ago, you've noticed that I uploaded the video where I described the changes that were just made to USMLE Step 1 and gave you my opinion about how this change would probably affect students who are in different stages of their medical career. And a lot of the questions that I got in the comment section of the video was specifically how this was going to affect IMGs. So I wanted to put part 2 of that video up online, and that's what this video now is going to do. So in this video in particular, I'm going to focus on the question of how hard is it to match if you're an IMG. The way to probably approach this question is to compare the most recent set of data for the percentage match rates for IMGs versus US grads. So we're talking about United States IMGs, non-United States IMGs, United States MDs, and United States DOs. And we're going to look at the different match rates for all of the different specialties. Because to be honest, data is our best friend here, and we can infer by looking at the data how hard it is for IMGs currently and how hard it's going to become even further in the future once these changes get enacted. So what you see in this table are the percentage of students who matched to the specialty that they applied to. So along the far left side, you see all of the different specialties that this chart summarizes. Anesthesia, diagnostic radiology, EMed, family med, general surgery, IM, the IM and pediatrics combined residency, neurosurge, neurology, OBGYN, ortho, pathology, peds, physical medicine and rehabilitation, and psych. And then the 4 different columns show you the percentage of each of the 4 different grads, medical graduates, who matched if they were applying to that specialty as their first choice. So in other words, let's do an example to make sure that you understand this data. Look at the top row, anesthesiology. So of US IMGs who applied to anesthesiology, where anesthesiology was their first choice, 64% of US IMGs matched. For the non-US IMGs, 60% matched if they applied to anesthesia as their first choice. United States MD students, 96% matched if they applied to anesthesia as their first choice. And US DO grads, 90.2% matched to anesthesia if anesthesia was their first choice. So that's how you read this chart. And pause the video right now if you want to take some time to digest all of this information, because admittedly, this is a lot to take in. So why don't you go ahead and pause the video if you want to review this. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we see here. So as it stands, this data is gathered from the 2018 match report. So this isn't even up to date in terms of the match that's about to happen or that just happened. This is from 2018. And as you can clearly see, it was already pretty difficult for IMGs, whether they're US or not, to match in a lot of different specialties. And just to really highlight some data here, look at neurosurgery. Nobody who was a United States IMG matched to neurosurge, and only 30% of non-US IMGs matched to neurosurgery. Let's take another example. Ortho. Only 15% of non-US IMGs matched to ortho. Okay, so as you can see, when you compare that to the US grads, it's pretty daunting, right? It's obviously already really difficult for IMGs to match in certain specialties. Now, the one thing that this data does not take into account is the choice of the residency. And what I mean by that is that by and large, where most USMD grads and where most USDO grads are choosing to apply, those are considered the highly sought after residency programs. So I'm talking about programs in major cities like New York City, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, etc. So when you've got USMDs and USDOs compiled into this chart, it's probably reflective of the fact that those US grads are also preferentially applying to highly sought after locations. And the IMGs, who are obviously also applying to those same programs, but IMGs tend to apply to programs that are considerably less desirable in terms of what a US grad might want to do. So IMGs tend to staff community hospitals and programs that are in locations that are not in major cities. So this data takes that into account. So when you see the lower match rate for IMGs, it's a lower match rate of an already less than desirable program. Whereas when you look at that USMD column, those are pretty high match rates for the highly desired locations. So you have to keep that in mind, because if you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, IMGs, US IMGs match to anesthesia with a 64% rate, those are the anesthesia programs when you compare them to the programs that the USMDs and the USDOs ultimately match to. So that's important to keep in mind. But what you can take away from this chart is that before the USMLE Step 1 change even was announced, and again, this data is from 2018, it was already really hard for IMGs to match. You can say that if you average this data, maybe there's a 50% chance of matching if you're a non-US IMG. And if you're a US IMG, it's probably, looking at this data, it's probably around 50% as well. But to not match half of the time, that's a really daunting thing to consider. So how is this going to change with the USMLE Step 1 change? Well, now that the 3-digit score will no longer be reported, a lot of these programs that would otherwise accept an IMG who had a ridiculously great USMLE Step 1 3-digit score, they're probably going to stop doing that now, because instead of looking at an obviously qualified IMG who just dominated Step 1, they're not going to see that anymore. They're just going to see pass. And programs won't know if that pass would have been a 270 or if that pass would have been a 210. There's just simply no way of knowing now. So in other words, it's probably going to be more of a gamble for a program director, or a residency program for that matter, to take or rank a US or non-US IMG, when it's a lot safer to just make that rank list go even deeper for US grads that are applying to those places as quote unquote backups. Now, what a lot of USMD and USDO grads do is they also apply to a lot of programs, because as you probably know, medical students are neurotic. So when they do that and they're applying to 60 to 100 programs, they really only have about 10 to 20 programs that they're actually interested in. And those are the ones that are going to be at the top of the rank list. But as more US grads apply to more programs and attend those interviews and make their rank lists run even deeper, because they're trying to basically give themselves safety programs, that's what they refer to them as, it's going to push more IMGs off those rank lists and make these numbers look even more lopsided. So I'm really sorry to have to be the one to break this news, but it is my opinion that it's only going to get harder for IMGs, both US and non-US, to match in the United States now that the 3-digit score reporting has gone away. So this is a wealth of really awesome data that you can use to make an informed decision as to what specialty you want to try to apply to if you're an IMG. And if you would prefer this in graphical form, this is a graph where the top are USMD students, and again, it's just percentages that match to each of the specialties. And then the bottom chart is the IMG chart. So the blue, the sort of light blue color, is United States IMGs, percent match to each of those different programs. And the green color is the non-US IMGs. Unfortunately, I did not pull the USDO chart in order to include it in this slide, but you can compare IMGs to the USMD grads. But again, what I think you should take away from this are a few things. One, even before the USMLE Step 1 3-digit score change to pass-fail, it was already about a 50% match rate for IMGs, and that's not great. And now that they're doing away with those 3-digit scores, programs that would have allowed IMGs to, quote, make up for the fact that they're IMGs by dominating Step 1 and getting like a 250 or higher, well, that's not going to be the case anymore once these changes take effect. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking to yourself, damn, how am I going to match? What I would encourage you to do is to look at this list and pick out a specialty where there is a relatively higher rate of matching if you're an IMG. Now, just going through this and eyeballing it, I think neurology would be a great choice. Pathology would be a great choice. Peds would be an excellent choice. And internal medicine is still an okay choice. Those are all specialties where there's at least a 50% chance of matching. And in the specialties of internal medicine and peds, there are so many different programs in the United States that there's definitely different tiers. And the bottom tier of programs for internal medicine and pediatrics typically don't get a lot of love from US grads. So there are a lot of spots that stay open. And those are the programs that you should be looking to interview at and observe at if you really want to secure a residency in the United States. Now, the other thing that I would say looking at this is that you have to be somewhat realistic in terms of what specialties are probably off limits. And I'm talking about things that have a roughly 30% or below chance of matching. So just looking at this list, I would say that probably you would want to avoid ortho, you want to avoid neurosurgery, you want to avoid PM&R, and you want to avoid psychiatry. Those are all increasingly competitive specialties. You can see the change from year to year in this match data in terms of how competitive those specialties are these days. So you want to avoid them because if you only match 1 out of 3 times, or roughly 3 out of 10 times, how many times do you really want to go through the application cycle before you're just willing to take a spot in a lower tier family medicine, internal medicine, peds, or pathology program? So if the goal is simply to come to the US and get that residency spot, you have to be willing to cut some corners here and go into one of these specialties where perhaps there's lower tier programs available. The other thing that I would urge you to consider is that if you're dead set on a certain specialty, and for example, you just can't imagine not being an OBGYN, what a lot of IMGs can do is they can match into internal medicine, family medicine, peds, one of the less competitive specialties that have lower tier programs, and you can actually transfer or switch programs to a different specialty. A lot of residents do that. They just get their foot in the door in the US by matching into one specialty, and then after their first year, they look for other programs in the more competitive specialties that have an open spot. Because unfortunately, sometimes residents have things come up in their personal life and they have to drop out of residency. People can have health issues, it doesn't matter. But as seats become available in the competitive specialties, then IMGs in the less than competitive specialties can try to do a little switcheroo. So it's a lot of different information I'm throwing at you, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit overwhelming, but it's very important considering how expensive the medical school process is and how much time is involved in this to really make an informed decision. And this data is so useful and so important to understand. So I hope that this was helpful to anybody that watched this video. My takeaway from this video is it was already hard for IMGs to match, and it's only going to get harder once the 3-digit score changes to pass-fail. That's it, guys. Good luck.